Everything starts with the customer's product. We take the product and design a folding carton around it based on the customer's needs. Of course, the carton has to look good on the store shelf and it has to function well for the end user, but it also needs to get filled and make it through distribution. We have conversations about all these things before we ever begin to design. This carton is an unglued 12-pack. Conversations with the customer led to the particular handle and opening feature. The filling equipment that will insert cans into this carton dictates the major and minor flaps. Once we design the carton, we validate it by asking the customer to approve it. If filling equipment is not involved, that approval is fairly simple. But if high-speed filling equipment is going to be used, we run a sample load through that equipment to make sure that the carton maximizes the equipment's capabilities. The one-up file drives everything throughout the process. The cutting die, printing plates, case packing if cases are used, palletizing, all of that flows from this file. Here it is on screen in the die room. A cutting die is similar to a cookie cutter. We load the file into the laser and burn a cutting die and the other tooling that's needed to cut the printed sheets into cartons. The laser cuts a groove in the wood, and then the rule bender cuts out scoring and cutting rule. The scoring rule is rounded at the top and it will press the sheet into a groove on the counter plate. That score that's left behind becomes the fold. A similar process takes place for cutting rule, except the cutting rule is sharp. Here you can see the die maker inserting cutting and scoring rule into the die. The same one-up file is used to create the stripper that removes scrap from the sheet, the blanker that separates the newly cut cartons from one another, and the counter plate that the sheet presses against as the die presses down on it. There are two different cutting processes, and each has a different type of tooling. Here is a sheet-fed platen cutter. The printed sheets feed into the press the same way that the litho press feeds, down the feed table. And grippers pull the sheet into the press the same way they did in the litho press. The grippers pull the sheet into XY coordinates so that the cutting die contacts each sheet at exactly the same position. Cutting is a very precise process. Consider that the sheet is large, and the pressure from the cutting die has to be consistent everywhere on it. This sheet is 18 thousandths of an inch thick. The knives will cut about 17.5 thousandths of an inch, but they will stop short of cutting all the way through. The counterplate is made of steel, and cutting that extra 0.5 thousandth of an inch would flatten the knives. The knives on the die have small nicks in them that leave the sheet uncut in places. These nicks are about 20 thousandths of an inch, and they look like bridges from one side of a cut to the other. That allows the sheet to remain in one piece after the die strikes it. The grippers pull the sheet from the cutting station to the stripping station. Another piece of tooling called the stripper knocks the scrap out of the sheet bare. That scrap then becomes furnished to make recycled paperboard. The final station on the cutter is called blanking. A third piece of tooling called a blanker strikes the sheet here and separates the cartons from one another. It does that by breaking the nicks. The sheet is now a number of individual blanks or unglued cartons. If the carton does not require gluing, we wrap the load and ship it to the customer. If it does require gluing, we send it to the gluer. The feed on the gluer feeds one individual blank carton into the gluer at a time. We load the pre-feed, then the machine loads those blanks into the feed, which maintains a constant number of cartons. That constant number of cartons equates to a constant amount of weight. That consistency allows one carton to be pulled in at a time. The belt pulls a carton, but the carton can only advance into the machine if there's enough space under the feed gate. Since this carton is 18 thousandths of an inch, the feed gate needs to be greater than that to allow one carton to pass, but it needs to be less than double that so that two cartons cannot enter at a time. The filling equipment requires that the carton have some fluff to it. That means that the carton needs to open easily on the filling machine. The first thing the folder gluer does is pre-break two of the scores. We call these the non-working scores. The carton passes over a set of rails that bend the scores and then lays the carton back down flat. Glue is applied as the carton passes under the glue gun. The system detects the presence of the carton and then opens the nozzle. Glue shoots out onto the carton. The system also retracts the nozzle to stop the flow of glue just before the carton moves away from the gun. More rails fold the working scores so that the glue flap contacts the opposite panel. The carton passes under a compression section called the trombone until the glue sets up. The cartons are automatically packed into corrugated cases and then palletized to send off to the customer. Web cutting can be done either with a platen die like we just described or with a rotary die. There are advantages to each. Platen dies can be changed out relatively quickly so that the press can run a number of different structures, 12 packs, 8 packs, 4 packs, for example. Rotary dies are faster because they work on a rotary motion rather than an up and down motion. But they're much more expensive and it takes a long time to change from one rotary die to another. A rotary die is actually a set of 4 dies. It consists of a top scoring and bottom scoring die and of top cutting and bottom cutting die. The scoring dies are timed exactly so that when the web of paperboard passes between them, the top can force the scores into the bottom's score channels. The web then travels to the cutting section where the top and bottom dies act as scissors. A separate roller called a stripper pulls the scrap out of the sheet. Then nip rollers separate one carton from another. The cartons are then palletized and delivered to the gluer or to the customer if there's no gluing. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or comments about anything you've seen so far.